Sarah stood frozen, staring at the wrecked gate. A personal attack. The HOA's notice pinned to her door was a declaration of war. She wasn't backing down, though. What happened next would shake the entire neighborhood. But let's rewind and see how it all began. It was a quiet Sunday morning, the kind where everything felt calm, almost serene. But as Sarah Matthews stepped onto her front porch, the stillness shattered. There it was. Her gate, the one she'd poured her heart into over the past few years, lay in pieces. The elegant iron frame, once a work of art, was now mangled, twisted into an unrecognizable mass of metal. Her breath caught in her throat. This wasn't just a random accident. The force behind the destruction was deliberate, almost personal. She walked closer, her eyes scanning the damage with disbelief. Her fingers brushed the cold, jagged edges of the wreckage, and that's when she noticed the letter. It was pinned to her door. An official HOA notice. Sarah's heart sank as she read the words. Disapproved? Aesthetic violations. Replace immediately or face fines. The letter felt like a slap in the face. The gate had been approved by the HOA when she first installed it, just as every other detail of her property had been. Everything was within the guidelines. Yet now, it seemed, someone had taken it upon themselves to destroy what she had carefully crafted. The thought of someone on the board, or even a neighbor, going out of their way to tear apart something she loved, left her shaken. Her pulse quickened. This wasn't about a gate. This was about something far deeper. They weren't just questioning her property. They were challenging her sense of ownership, her hard work, her identity. It wasn't just a violation of rules. It felt like a violation of her right to express herself in the space she called home. A wave of anger followed, but it was tempered by something else, a heavy sense of betrayal. Someone had made sure to destroy the gate, and she knew exactly what that meant. The beginning of a fight she hadn't expected, but one she wasn't about to lose. Sarah's resolve hardened as she dug deeper into the law. Each fact she uncovered made the anger burning inside her grow fiercer. The HOA had no legal right to destroy her property, not without proper consent or following legal procedures. She could feel the weight of the injustice pressing down on her chest, suffocating, as she continued her research. As she spoke to her neighbors, Sarah discovered that she wasn't alone. Other residents had been through similar battles, too afraid to stand up, too beaten down by the system to fight back. The more Sarah learned, the clearer it became that this wasn't just about a gate. This was about power, about a system that saw homeowners as nothing more than subjects to be controlled. But it was also about fear. The fear that had kept others quiet. The fear that had given the HOA the confidence to act with such impunity. She wouldn't let herself fall into that same trap. Not this time. With a sense of purpose, she reached out to the HOA. She wasn't looking for a fight, just a resolution. At least, that's how she thought it would go. But the response she received was nothing short of dismissive. Emails filled with cold, bureaucratic indifference. Calls that went unanswered or were cut short. It became clear that the HOA had no interest in resolving this issue reasonably. They didn't care about her property, her feelings, or the countless others like her. They were in charge, and their stance was simple. We make the rules. You must comply. Thomas Green, the arrogant leader of the board, was particularly scornful. His dismissive attitude was a slap in the face, his words dripping with a sense of superiority that made Sarah's blood boil. He was the one pulling the strings, and in his eyes, she was just another homeowner who needed to be kept in line. But Sarah couldn't let that go. The injustice, the arrogance, the indifference, it all came crashing down on her. She was cornered now, with nowhere to turn, but there was one thing she knew for certain. She wasn't backing down. If the HOA wanted a fight, they'd get one. This was just the beginning. The courtroom was suffocating with tension as Sarah stood at the center, her eyes fixed on the judge. Her lawyer was in full force, presenting a flawless case of property destruction and the HOA's blatant disregard for the law. Every word, every piece of evidence seemed to pile up against the board, but Thomas Green, standing tall with a smug grin plastered on his face, refused to budge. He denied any wrongdoing, claiming that the destruction of Sarah's gate was simply enforcement of the rules, as if his words could erase the brutal damage done to her property. But Sarah was prepared for this moment. Her lawyer leaned forward, presenting a piece of evidence that would change everything. The courtroom fell into a heavy, expectant silence as the lawyer slid a stack of printed emails across the table. These weren't just any emails. These were from Thomas Green himself. Emails that clearly stated he had ordered the destruction of Sarah's gate without proper consent, without any legal justification. Green's face turned ashen as the judge carefully reviewed the incriminating evidence, the weight of his arrogance finally catching up with him. The silence was deafening. The eyes of everyone in the room were on Green, waiting for him to squirm, to find some way to wiggle out of this mess he'd created. But there was no escape. Not this time. The judge finally spoke, his voice calm but decisive. It's clear that this HOA has acted outside of its authority. Sarah Matthews, your gate will not only be restored, but replaced with one of even greater value, funded by the HOA. A wave of relief crashed over Sarah like a flood. For months, she had fought against the system, against the disregard of her rights. And now, in this moment, it was all worth it. The feeling of justice was overwhelming, a sense of vindication she hadn't allowed herself to hope for. She had won. The battle was over. The relentless legal struggle, the sleepless nights, the stress, it had all led to this. Thomas Green, once so sure of his power, had been exposed for the fraud he was. And for Sarah, it was the beginning of something new. Months had passed since the courtroom victory, but Sarah's sense of triumph still lingered as she stood in her front yard, watching a team of skilled craftsmen work on the new gate. The once ruined iron frame was now a distant memory, replaced with something even more exquisite. A custom ornamental gate that far surpassed the one she had lost. The intricate designs shimmered in the sunlight, each curve and detail more beautiful than the last. As the craftsmen carefully installed the pieces, Sarah couldn't help but smile, the sense of victory welling up inside her. The HOA, having been legally forced to cover the full cost of the replacement, had no choice but to pay for this far more expensive option than they had anticipated. The once untouchable organization that had thought they could bully and control their residents had been brought to their knees, and Sarah, standing strong in the face of their corruption, had ensured the consequences were real and tangible. The irony wasn't lost on her. What they had destroyed was now being replaced with something better, something that they would have never imagined. As the final touches were added to the gate, Sarah felt a deep, almost overwhelming sense of satisfaction. It wasn't just about the gate anymore. It was about standing up for herself, about refusing to let others dictate her life, about proving that even the smallest injustice deserved to be challenged. This was more than a personal victory. It was a statement to everyone in the neighborhood. No one, no matter how powerful they seemed, could get away with treating others unfairly. The power dynamics had shifted. The HOA, once a seemingly invincible force, was now humbled, and Sarah stood outside her home, gazing at the gleaming new gate, feeling the weight of everything she had overcome. This was the fruit of her hard-fought battle, and it was sweeter than she had ever imagined.